Okay, so Cate Luzio, oh my goodness, founder and CEO of Luminary, a global collaboration hub committed to advancing women through community and content. With over 20 years of leadership experience in financial services, leading global multi-billion-dollar businesses. In her banking career, she has held executive positions at HSBC, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America. She serves on the national board for Girls Inc. and Water Aid and is on the advisory board of Pomp and Whimsy. I'm sure you've seen her all over the place, from featured in Bloomberg to Wall Street Journal to Business Insider, CNBC, Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Forbes, the list goes on. So really excited to have Cate join us today to talk about resilience road mapping, which I guess is kind of a good topic for you today too.
Yeah, I just saw Ashley's note. So I want this to be not I'm talking at you. For those that are Luminary members know I like interaction and engagement and want people to share stories. First of all, that's how we all learn. And second of all, it shouldn't just be about me. I thought what I would do for those of you that don't know me is just share a little bit about my background and why the risk-taking theme throughout my life led me to really become doing what I am doing today, but also how I cultivate what I call the resilience roadmap. And so, Shannon, you could just put it on the first slide. It'll stay up there for a little while.
Oh, okay.
So that'll say, and again, don't worry about the slides. I'm not a slides person anyway, even though I'm a banker. So my background, and again, for those of you that this is repetitive, I apologize, but I think it's important to tell the story of why I feel like I am a risk taker. I grew up in a very, middle-class family, 2 brothers. A father was an FBI agent. My mom was a teacher. There was no talk of business. There was really no talk of going into business or money other than saving your money, right? So you had to go to college and save your money. But from a very young age, my father told me that if I didn't stick up for myself, if I didn't put myself out there, if I didn't go into places and introduce myself and have my head up versus my head down, I wouldn't get anywhere. A lot of that had to do with sports, a lot. I was really growing up in New Jersey, in the area that I grew up in. And it's funny, Jen DeSilva and I were having this conversation yesterday. There weren't a lot of girls playing sports. And certainly I played soccer. I have a brother that's 1 year younger than me. So we were sort of like twins in the dynamic duo all the way until we got to middle school. I played soccer and basketball, but was always, if not the only girl on any of the teams, one of the few. But I never thought about it that way. I just knew that I had to be just as good as everybody on that field or on the court, and had to take, as my dad would say, more risks than any of them. Shoot the ball more, kick the ball more, slide tackle more, for any of you that know soccer. You need to make a name for yourself in a very positive way. That experience up through sort of to middle school was really, I think, super important, because when I got to middle school, I was told that I couldn't play on a boys team anymore, that I had to go and try out for a girls team. That was our travel team, for any of you that have kids or have played travel. And I didn't understand why. I had never played with girls, and now I was being forced to play with girls when I was just as good as the boys that I was playing with for all these other years. Anyway, long story short, my dad said, well, do something about it. And we went and saw the commissioner of the league and said, it's unfair if I can't try it out. There was a lot of hemming and hawing. Long story short, I was the only girl that tried out. I made the team. And what my dad likes to say is, you didn't make it because you were a girl. They didn't want to let you on in the first place, but you were out there, your head was up, you were using all of your skills and your reputation and your hard work to become who you were on that team. Great. Get to high school. No girls team in my high school for soccer. Same thing. You cannot play on the boys team. I don't care if you petition everybody in this whole town. You can't play on the boys team. There's no girls on this soccer team. You can run track. And so for that first year of my freshman year, I ran track, but in the behind, I worked and said to my dad, I can't do this. I want to play soccer. That's what I want to do. I want to play soccer in college. And he said, well, sometimes you got to take a risk. And I was really embarrassed at the time because I was a freshman. I'm not cool, and everything we think about, which is also, by the way, we have the logo for Luminary, or the tagline is "Come sit at our table." You don't feel like you're in a place where you belong, and so I didn't want to take that risk, but that me wanting to play on that team outweighed it. And so I got another girl who I knew and said, "You want to play soccer? I want to play soccer." She had transferred in from another state, and we went around knocking on doors and doors and doors, and went every kid in the school and signed a petition. We presented to the superintendent of the school, and he said, "You got yourself a team. The only thing is, you can either have the boys' uniforms, hand-me-downs, or you can raise money." So that first year, we actually took the boys' uniforms. I mean, come on, hello, gender equality. And then we did a fundraiser. And by the way, the same thing happened in my girls' team for basketball. We had to use the boys' uniforms and then had to raise our own money because they wouldn't spend money on us.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I tell that is because 20 years later, from the day that I started that team, I was living in London as a banker. My father called me. It's 2:00 in the morning. And he said, screaming. And I thought, oh my God, something's happened to someone in my family. And he said, "All your risks paid off." And I said, "I'm sleeping. What are you talking about?" He said, "Mattawan High School, where I went to school, just won the girls' state championship in soccer." And I said, "That has nothing to do with me, Dad. I'm going back to bed." He said, "No. If you hadn't done that, if you hadn't taken a risk, put yourself out there, shown that you were up for the challenge, utilized your resources, talked to people, gathered signatures, you would never have that team." I went back to bed and really didn't think about it, to be honest. And I didn't think about it again until I started Luminary. So fast forward, I am in college. I'm a political science major because my dad was a FBI agent. This is what I'm going to do, change the world. And I'm going to go into politics. And then I realized after multiple internships, hell no, I didn't want to go into politics. And I went to work for a nonprofit. And about a year into it, the CFO of the company said to me, "Kate, no offense to nonprofits, I work here, I'm a CFO, but I worked for 25, 30 years in the private sector and made some money before I worked in nonprofit. Do yourself a favor and go get a big job." And I was 23 years old. I didn't even know what a big job was. The internet boom, for those of you that are in your 40s or 50s, the internet boom was happening. I got a job for a nonprofit. 6 months into that job, I mean, not a nonprofit, a tech company. 6 months into that job, my CEO says to me, "Do you have a passport?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Great, pack your bags. You're going to China for 6 weeks. And you're going to go see if we can set up joint ventures in China for this company." This is pre-China entering the World Trade Organization. So you had to enter with particularly in what we were doing. I did not even know what a JV meant. I had to Google it, which was also brand new. I think I had to Yahoo it. Anyway, 6 weeks turned into, this is an incredible opportunity. I can do this. I then spent the next 2 years living and working back and forth in China, never thinking that I could do anything in technology because that's not what I was told I could do. I wasn't good enough. But as my dad would say, look at this risk. You took this huge risk, moved to China. We're the only, not only woman around the table, but the only Caucasian really in the rooms. And I had never thought about that until my dad said it. And I thought, wow, I am the only woman. And by the way, they don't like me. They're constantly not even looking at me. They don't address me. They only address the men in the room. Very culturally common. And it wasn't until I had a very long drinking session, to be very honest, with some senior executives at China Mobile, that they realized that I was serious. And when I say I had a very long drinking session, culturally, I had to understand what was important to them to show them respect. And I leaned into that. And from then on, it was amazing. I then came back to the States when my company got acquired. I stayed with that company. I got my master's degree at night. And then I was walking through the college campus at Georgetown, and one of my professors said, "You should apply for this role. It's a global development program at a bank called MBNA, if anyone remembers them." And I said, "I have no idea what a banker does. Don't look in my checking account. I have a terrible credit score. I mean, what?" And he said, "No, I think you'd be really good for this. Just go and interview." So I sent my resume in. I went to Wilmington, Delaware. On the spot, they offered me the job. And I said, this is not the right job for me. I kind of just did this to see if I could do it. And they said, take a risk. The CTO of the company said to me, take a risk on moving to Wilmington, take a risk on building a career in finance. And I just laughed because I thought, they are going to find out that I know nothing about this business. And lo and behold, I did it. 18 years later, I was still in banking and I loved every single second of it. Well, maybe not every single second, but the majority. And the reason I stayed in banking all those years, one, I was getting incredible opportunities, but because I was making those opportunities, I was raising my hand. I was keeping my head up. I was talking about myself in a very authentic way. I had learned from the best. I had two brothers. I had grown up with boys that's what they did. They bragged. They talked about how great they were in sports and school. And that first job in banking, I had a team of mainly boys, men, that all had MBAs and I had an MA, which, no offense to MBAs. An MA is pretty darn good from Georgetown in foreign relations. And what I realized that over that 18 years, I moved to 3 countries. I moved to 3 different banks, big banks. I went from a 1,000 person organization to a 200,000 to a 250,000 to a 300,000 when I left. And every single one of those jobs, with the exception of the last one, was different. It was nothing that I was used to. It was none of the business that I had ever run. But every single job and every single move came from my network. And it wasn't me, it was me saying, here I am, I'm out here, I'm mobile, I'm ready to take a risk. But it was also the fact that I was looked at as a risk taker, that I could take and build a business and take it to the next step. And it was also to the slide that I have on the page. Failure is not an option. And I know we hear that and it's like, roll your eyes. To me, you only fail if you give up. And I will never give up. I will fall down 1,000,000 times. I will get myself back up. I will brush myself off. And as my dad told me, all my entire childhood, walk it off, right? If you're not bleeding and you don't need to go to the hospital, walk it off, right? You have to be out there. You have to be in the game. And so for me, I have definitely fallen down so many times in my career, and I continue to do that. But the only time I think I would look at something like a failure is if I gave up. Some would say I gave up on banking when I left to build Luminary. And it was a really hard decision when I did that, partly because I had spent 18 years talking to women about how they could be at the senior level. If they could see it, they could be it, to get the mentorship, to put themselves out there. I was, and I think I see, if she's still on, Tina, who worked at one of the banks that I did when I was still there. I was out there often talking about everything you needed to do to get ahead and how women had to kind of own their risk taking and own their worth, right? So in leaving, there were 2 risks. One, I was leaving a very stable, very lucrative career that I was already very senior and think I could have accomplished a lot. The other risk was leaving all of these women and young talent behind. And I took that very personally. If I'm doing this, I'm not setting a good example. And I remember calling my mom, this time my mom, not my dad. And she said, what you're good at is taking a risk, owning it. And you won't fail. You will succeed. Why? Because you bet on yourself. You're not betting on someone else. You're betting on yourself, and no one knows you better than you. And so 18 years of a finance career, I decided, not even knowing that I was going to do Luminary, that I wanted to take a risk on myself. And whether that was a month, a year, I had no idea, but I needed to give myself an opportunity to understand where I wanted to be. Not I needed to find myself, but where I wanted to be next. when I talk about taking a risk, so my last job at JP Morgan was running multinational corporate banking for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I had an amazing $750 million P&L. I had, 50 people. When I left to go to HSBC, I was recruited. I went to run that globally. So it was the same business, but on a much bigger scale. But it wasn't as challenging for me because I knew that I could do it. And yes, I had all these amazing performance goals and numbers, and where I got so much out of it was taking risks on other people in the firm. Because the first thing, and some people may have heard me talk about this, it's nothing against HSBC, but Cate, when are you going to hire people from JP Morgan? Cate, when are you hiring people from Bank of America? I'm like, you got 300,000 people here. There's got to be good people. I don't think I need to go look yet. Let me assess my talent. And one of the things that I'm very proud of in those couple of years that I was at HSBC is that I never hired from someone from JP Morgan, and I never hired from someone from Bank of America, because I really wanted to take risks on the talent that was in the firm, develop them, invest in them, and see them succeed. Oh, by the way, also telling those that weren't getting the opportunities and likely wouldn't or had better opportunities outside of the firm to leave. And part of that goes back to me as a risk taker, and that I can make decisions and I can take choices. I have to be comfortable with those. And so 2 months after I left my lucrative and stable job, I was heavily depressed because I thought, what did I do? I just gave this all up. And my mentor, who's still my mentor, came from JP Morgan. He kept telling me, you are so ridiculous. You have moved around the world. You have taken on jobs you knew nothing about. You have made relationships with people in every single country that you've walked in and cultures. And now you're sitting here crying about the fact that you're depressed and you didn't do a good, make a good decision. He's like, so what? What have you always told people? If it doesn't work, you can always go back. You have a great reputation. And I heard this from Paige Thomas. If you don't know her, we had a session with her a few weeks ago at Luminary. She's the president or CEO of Saks Off Fifth. She said, you have the 3 R's: reputation, resume, oh shit, and there's another one, and results. And that's it. You have reputation, resume, and results. And so had I known Paige 3 years ago, I would have loved to hear that. But I knew that he was right. And the phone ringing from recruiters around the country, if I wanted to go back into banking, was proof in that. But a month after that, not even, I wrote a business plan that many of you know, for Luminary, came together in 2 weeks. And I am not someone that can have a side hustle. I just can't. I have to be all into everything that I'm doing. That's just me. And so as I was looking and talking and interviewing for lots of different roles, I remember my boyfriend came home and said, how did your interview with XYZ go? And I said, well, I had it, but I told him that I'm not interested because I'm all in on this business, which, by the way, wasn't even called Luminary yet. A week later, I had created financial projections. How can I do this? Do I have to go and raise money? I don't want to do that. I was a banker. It's miserable. No one gives you money, all the things we all know. And I decided to self-fund it. So in leaving that very stable and lucrative career, but also a very risky, very risk-aware career, I think I took the biggest risk I've ever taken, was 100% betting all on me, that I could build this, that I could do this. And by the way, self-funding it. So not asking someone else to bet on me, but me betting on me. And so that led me to where we are today. We were 14 months old when the pandemic struck. I had invested a lot of money into our physical space. For those of you that know, we were building a physical community that convened and advanced women in the workforce, to overnight running a digital community while also now having a physical space in New York. We did not get rid of that for a reason. We will come back together in person, but we will also never untether from the digital world. The world is new. I think it's pretty incredible that we can talk to women in Florida, in Arizona, in Chicago, in New York, in Hong Kong, in LA, and they can dial in for 5 minutes or they can be here for the hour. And they don't have to feel guilty about not making something or leaving early. When in our lives would we have ever have had that? How many times have you gone to something, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to leave early. Everyone's going to see, and I'm going to have to walk out of that event. It's like, forget it. It's over. Like, you now just get off the Zoom, and lots of people say, I got to go. And so when I think about the risk taking and the resilience roadmap, and I'll get to that in 1 second, is the 3 things that I have on the screen really led me to every single, I guess, example of risk taking, but also resilience in my career and my personal life. I've been through 2 divorces. Not everybody knows that. Both of them not great. The second one, I was sued for a lot of money. And I have no children. I went through 5 rounds of IVF to not be able to have kids. And I've lived around the world in not so great places that didn't particularly like who I was as a loud, aggressive, and I love the word aggressive, American. And I lean into the fact that I'm aggressive, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be taking risks. I wouldn't be raising my hands. I wouldn't be keeping my head up. And now that's to say, that's not every day. Do I want to put my head down? Do I want to keep my hand down? Do I want to give up? Do I want to say, fuck it, I'll fail? I don't care. This is too hard. I'm tired. Yep. I do that every day, by the way, at Luminary. Every day. It is hard. And I did that when I was a banker. You do that. That's human nature. That's coming to grips with, like, life is hard. You're managing lots of things. Those of you that have children or elder parents or caregiving in any way, no, that's just exacerbating everything. And so when I look at failure is not an option, and I look into, I say, I hated the book Lean In, and I'm sorry, it's just not me. I think it's bullshit. It doesn't work in every culture. It certainly doesn't work in every company. What I like to say is lean into and versus lean on. We talk especially about women about, let's lean on each other. No. You can lean on me. That's great. But I need you to lean into me and tell me what you need. I need you to lean into me and say, here's my ask. Melissa, what do you need? I just got off the phone with a member 5 minutes ago that needs legal help in a terrible situation she's dealing with her company. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bother you. I'm like, you set up a meeting. Now lean into what you need from me. If I didn't want to help, I wouldn't have taken the meeting. If you're in corporate America, if they take the meeting, then you better be prepared for either really listening, because you want to learn everything you possibly can from that person, or have your ask. No more can we say this terrible saying, pick your brain. If I hear it from anybody, I tell them, then you know nothing about me, because I'm very vocal. I hate that saying. You're not picking my brain. Why do you want to pick my brain? Let's have a conversation. Let's develop a relationship. Or if this is something that you need my help on, or you have an ask, then just tell me. I'd rather not beat around the bush. And I think men are so much better at that. They get much more comfortable very early on in doing that. And so for me, I've always been about, I'm going to set up a meeting with you. I want to learn everything there is to know about you, what your job is, what you do, but also what does that look like in a relationship for me? And so that idea of leaning into and leaning on, and it's not just one person in one relationship. It's your whole community. It's your whole network. It's also your company, right? If you're running your own business, you have to lean into that team every single day. The amount of times I hear founders saying, I don't delegate, I have to take so much on. It's like, I get it, but you got to lean into your team. That's why you're building it. And then if you're in a job where you have a boss, you got to lean into your team and your colleagues and the senior management that's above you and the younger people that are below you, because at the end of the day, nobody cares about your career, your path, nobody. I don't care what your boss says. I don't care what your investor says. I don't care what anyone says. They don't care about it more than you do. And so if you don't take control and take risks, and for me, this idea of falling down a million times and learning from it and getting back up, and this idea of leaning into versus leaning on. The last thing that I would say is pivot versus adapt. I think some of the Luminary members may have heard me say this. I can't stand the word pivot. Luminary, nor did I pivot when I created the digital component of this business, nor did I pivot when I left my career. I adapted to the environment that I was in and that I wanted to be in. Certainly you could look at what I did when I left the big banking job and then to starting my own company. Yeah, you could say that was a career pivot. But to me, it was like, I'm still managing, I'm still building, I still want to build an empire, I still want to have a kick-ass career, I still want to do everything. I'm just doing it in a different way. I'm doing it in a different company. It would be like me leaving HSBC or JP Morgan and going to a community bank on the corner in my town that I grew up in, right? I just chose to do that in my own company that I built. The second part of that is this idea of pivoting Luminary. So in my little sports brain, a pivot is you change direction. So if anybody plays basketball or has played basketball or watches basketball, when you get the ball and you pivot, you change directions. When I got the ball, which was the pandemic, and this kind of weird analogy, is I stayed still and said, okay, I can either shoot, I can dribble around, or I can pass the ball. And I chose to shoot. And the way I did that was building overnight what some of you now have that are Luminary members and certainly are part of it, or some of our sessions can join from anywhere in the world. And so, early on, it was like, oh, you pivoted. I was like, I didn't change my mission. My mission is still exactly 100% the same. I just adapted to the environment that I was in. I was also really backed up against the wall, right? Like many of you, maybe in your career, maybe within your team, maybe you're sitting at home, like my manager never notices me. Maybe you're building your company. I chose to come out swinging. And we're a year into the pandemic. Is that going to be the same forever? I don't know. I don't know what any of this holds. All I know is that I have to keep falling down and picking myself back up. I know that I have to keep adapting to whatever's being thrown at me. And then I have to lean into every single relationship, network, company that I know of, right? To continue to build not only what I'm building, but myself, my skills as a leader, my skills as a business owner. And who knows, I'm 45, almost 46. I don't know if I'll be doing this for the next 30 years, and that's okay. I got to get comfortable with that risk, right? Of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so the last kind of, slide is really for me is this idea of a roadmap. Shannon, do you have it? There we go. Is the who, the what, and the how. And then I have on the right, obviously, the ask. So the who is in your community, your connections that you have, your networks that can help you not only take risks, but determined to support that resilience, right? None of us are doing any of this on their own. And that could be, I got to get my virtual schooled kid to his class, to I've got to get my boss to give me a promotion, although he hasn't seen me in a year and all he's seen is me in sweatpants. Who in your network, in your community that you can actually identify as to help you lean into and build that resilience? Some days it's going to be more, some days it's going to be less, some days it's going to be all on you. For me, probably more often than not, I do feel as a small business owner in the midst of this shit, it feels like it's all on me. But then I pick my head up, and part of that who is my team. And for those of you that know my team, they're pretty darn incredible. They got me through COVID. They got me through almost quitting this business and saying, why am I doing this? And they've built an incredible community alongside me, and they're the who. The what is how you lean into all of those, but then take advantage and identify all the tools that are at your disposal. Some of that could just be a conversation, like this conversation I just referenced with one of our Luminary members that needs help legally, and just calling me and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry to bother you, which she doesn't have to say, and saying, do you know where I can go for these tools or who I should talk to? So there are a lot of tools at your disposal. There are people within your company. There are sponsors. There are mentors. There are communities like Luminary and Connect for Women that you can actually tap into. If you don't know who they are, that's an issue. You have to identify what those tools look like and be willing to take a risk and ask. Ask for introductions. Part of the what is the introductions. It's me saying, or Melissa Blatt saying, hey, Cate, I'm really trying to build my business. And she has an incredible business, by the way, called Indie Pop. And I would love to be on your LinkedIn Live, Gold Digger. Great. Awesome. I'll introduce you to, if I even have an audience, I'll introduce you to that audience. That is the easiest thing. If I don't have capacity or it's not the right time, I will say, I don't have time right now. Let's do it for some other time. Or, yep, we'll put you in the calendar. It may not be for 2 months. And Melissa is a good example. We've had hell of a time scheduling this, but now it's scheduled. And she was patient and she didn't give up. She was resilient. And I want to be on this and I need to be on this. And this is a great opportunity. And you know what? It's going to be a fun conversation. So when you think about the what, you have to identify those pretty early on, right? Because it's almost like mapping it out, right? Think about when you're a kid and you're manipulating your parents and thinking, you know, I got to do one against the other for my mom and my dad. Identifying who is the person that you're going to go to, what you're going to ask for, right, is so important. Otherwise, it's like, well, you came with nothing, right? So you walk away with nothing. And by the way, you might walk away with nothing. That's the other thing. We also have to get comfortable with falling down and people saying no, and it's not the right time, and I can't help you. Okay. If you've ever been in sales, which I've spent my career in it, you just got to move on. I often think I can change their minds over time. So I always leave a little bit of that door or the window open, a little bit of a creak, but you've got to be uncomfortable. And the same thing with you're taking a risk, right? You've got to be uncomfortable that you may miss the mark. You may jump in with both feet and completely fuck it up. And that is okay. There have been many times on this entrepreneurial journey that I felt like I fucked it up, and I probably will a million times more, and that's okay. And then the last is really the how. So you take those top 2 blocks and then you think about how are you leveraging not only the who and the what, but the how is two-way street of coaching and mentorship, right? It can't all be about you. I hate transactions. For anybody that knows me from a banking world, I was one of the most honest bankers out there. I would tell a client what we were good at and what we weren't, because I wanted to build a relationship. I didn't want to just complete a transaction that was likely not going to help me anyway, because I wanted long-term opportunities, long-term growth. I always saw the long-term growth, right? So it's like short-term pain for long-term gain. And that is really, for me, investing in relationships. I was all about that. The marketing and amplification, people will think about this. This is my business. Actually, think about it in the context of you. How are you amplifying yourself? How are you amplifying your voice? How are you being that head that everybody in that hand that people pick? How many of you self-advocate? How many of you feel comfortable saying, I love to advocate for myself. I love to promote everything that I do. If any of you think that, I would be really surprised, because it is hard to get comfortable with feeling like that. Because if you've taken I Am Remarkable, and I see Maran's head shaking, we don't like to brag. But you know what? You can be proud. And you can be out there and you can be telling people why you're incredible and why you should be doing this and why you're the right person to lead this business or take this job or run this company. Because you are taking the risk on yourself. And then the last part of that is really partnership and collaboration. You don't do it alone. None of this is done alone. I love when I hear founders saying that that's just them and they did it all. You can't. There's just no way that's humanly possible. If you talk to any CEO in the world, especially large Fortune 500s, they will always say they have an incredible leadership team. They have a great team. They have this, they have that. So we have to recognize, reward, and look at collaboration and partnership as, by the way, the pie is really big. We can all have a piece of it if we work together. And so the last thing that I would say is, as you're thinking about your table, right? We talk about come sit at our table and the table you're creating. There's a really great opportunity to share it with others, but also make it your own. And part of that comes down to being resilient, taking risks, and owning your path and everything that comes next. So that's my little That's my little resilience roadmap. And I would love to hear other people's, like, what's their resilient, like, what's their views on risk taking? What are their, stories? Because it's not just about me.
Can we ask questions, or do you want us to drop them in the
Sure.
chat?
Hi, Leslie. Of course you can.
So my first question is, in my head, I'm always looking at the risk and trying to figure out what's my comfort or discomfort with the level of risk. So my question for you is, do you look at risk to different levels? Like Inception, I mean, how do you evaluate where it's too much or not enough?
100%. I think calculated risk, right? Being risk aware versus risk averse is so important, right? I mean, moving to China, moving to Mexico City, moving to London, I had to weigh what's the benefit there? What are the pros and the cons? And for me, for every one of those moves, the pros far outweighed the cons. The same with my bank moves. The last one was iffy, Leslie. Me leaving JP Morgan and moving to HSBC was the one I struggled with the most. Very different organization, very different culture, very white. And here I was, a woman, aggressive, American, and I struggled with that. And I ultimately made that decision. I would say that, but you have to take those, you have to calculate those risks and understand. It was the same with the business, right? I could have raised money. And here's why I didn't. Number one, it would have taken me likely a year or more to do that. And I didn't want to wait. The time was now. And when I have an idea in my head, you can't stop me. Number two, as much as I'm a salesperson and I hear a no, I know when I have a good idea. And so I also knew there were going to be a ton, and there were, because I socialized it before we launched, naysayers. And did I want to let all of that over the next year, year and a half, 2 years of raising money bleed into everything that I did? No. So the risk for me was I had the privilege of saving a lot of bank bonuses and all those kids that I thought I was going to have, all the college educations that I started saving for, I didn't have. So I took that and put it into the company. Big risk. But you know what? As everyone hears, and I think this year has been a great example, you can't take it with you. And I obviously am a for-profit company, I want to make money and I want to be here and I want to keep impacting. But I think a calculated risk is really important. Understanding, and that may be, I can't leave my stable job because I have kids, or I'm the breadwinner, or I have a ton of debt, or whatever it is. But everybody's situation is different, and you have to look at that and make those tough decisions. Like I said, some are going to pay off and some aren't, and you have to be okay with that.
I have a question/comment. Hi everyone.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
So you talk a lot about being an athlete, growing up. And I am the most mediocre athlete there is. Like, I was competitive, but I was really bad at everything. In fact, I talked myself into my JV volleyball team sophomore year, and then people found out that I had talked myself into it, so I got untaught, so I didn't get in because but my best friend was 6'1", and she was on the basketball team and ended up playing professionally. And I always think of us as like the odd couple. And my question for you is, like, I talk a lot about community and how it's those kind of people that I've actually been a magnet to, this like yin and yang. So who have been like, have you had that growing up, like the yin to your yang?
Yeah, I think, I grew up in a neighborhood full of boys. Literally, there was one girl on my block, and no offense to her, we were not friends. And probably that's because I really just gravitated to playing sports and the boys. I wouldn't have survived my childhood with two brothers as athletic and competitive as they are if I hadn't. And I just, to your point, I have a very competitive nature and spirit. I mean, ask anybody on my team, ask anybody I've ever dated. That's just who I am. My yin and yang are always people that are more even keeled. And that's really important for me to have that. Like, even on my team, I am a 0 to 60, 100 miles an hour. That's not always a great thing. But I need the balance on my team or my leadership, my management team. So when I was working in a company, to have that. And I think also my personal relationships. It's hard to have everybody that's the same, like type A perfectionists, like going a million miles an hour. It's hard. And I had actually in my basketball team in high school, one of my friends was like that. And I remember when she broke her hand, and this is terrible to say, she punched a locker because of a stupid boy and she broke her hand. I was like, yes. Terrible. I'm admitting it, but I was like, yes, I don't have to keep fighting for the ball anymore. And she was a ball hog. And my dad always said it, you don't shoot, you're not taking enough risks, you're letting her run the court. And for me, when I remember saying it and I came home and I was like, blah, 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 this person broke their hand. And my mom was like, that is terrible. My mom was the yin and then my dad is the yang, right? And my dad's like, no, this is a great opportunity. She's going to shoot. She's going to do this. Probably not the best analogy, but you need that, Nancy. And I think there's nothing wrong. Like, I'm an extrovert. Those of you that know me know that. But there's not to say that introverts aren't amazing leaders and managers, and they don't have to know sports and they don't have to be everything. What I do is personal to me, and I do gravitate to people that like athletics and that are competitive. And I think if you look at my team, there's a really good mix. Mel, you had a question or a comment before.
Well, I was thinking about what you said about with the sales, and it's almost like building a callus to just keep going when you hear those no's. But it reminded me, my first investor, probably for over 6 months, he was not interested. And I knew so much. I mean, I just believed so much in my idea and that this person was going to be the right person. And finally, I got the yes, and he was my first investor. And after that, it opened up 2 other doors. But it's when you actually, I think, you have to believe so much in yourself to keep moving forward. And sometimes a no is a no, and you've got to move quickly. And I have this conflict within myself because I like to be perfect. And when you want that perfectionism and do everything right in your business, you can't, because you're going to fail. And those failures, so I've tried to fail fast and fail forward and move on as quickly as possible. And so that's this opened up so many memories too. Just a side note, a personal side note is, I got a clap, thank you. So one thing that we do share, because our paths are completely different, is our fathers. And my dad also kind of taught me this kind of to dig in. But we moved 4 times to different states before the age of 14. And when you're young and you stand in front of the blackboard in a new school, and my nickname is Missy, please don't call me that, but they're like, hi, this is Missy, we're introducing her, she just moved from Virginia. I had to stand up and exist and survive to be part of, to try to fit in. Otherwise I would have no friends and I'd have no life. And I think building that resilience for kids at a young age, like I hated them, sorry parents, but in fact they built in me to risk take. So when I got offered jobs in other places, I took it, not even thinking, oh, it's in another state, or for you, it was another country. But I already had this built in before the age of 14. And so I would encourage anyone that is raising kids to really try to put them in situations where it's not comfortable, because that is going to build, through adversity, you build that callus, that muscle. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah. I mean, I think about when I was growing up and my parents, you know, they grew up in a world where right, I'm sure a lot of us have this, they go to work for a company and they stay there for their entire career, right? And like, that was my dad's, like, you gotta do that. And I'm like, that just sounds horrible and boring.
When I decided to do Luminary, my mom really didn't understand it. She just was like, I don't get it. And I had sent her my business plan more because she's an English teacher and I wanted her to grammatically proof it and make sure that Even though I wasn't sending it to anyone, I'm a perfectionist. I wanted to be perfect, right? And she's like, okay, I've never heard of this thing called co-working. What does that even mean? And why would people come to a space? And what do you mean there's events? And about a few weeks later, I went to a trip. I went to Minneapolis and I went to California to see a couple of the women's spaces that ended up becoming partners. And I brought my mom. And the minute we walked into the one outside of San Francisco, she was quiet. And then we walked out and she said, oh, I understand now. And this is what you're meant to do. And so for her, it just, she didn't understand that because, by the way, a month before that, I was in Florida with my aunt who was a P&G executive for 35 years and was telling her what I was doing. And she was giving me all that's amazing, Katie. Great job. And then I'm on a group text afterwards because I had sent pictures to both my aunt and my mother. And my aunt, who is very reserved, Ohio conservative, writes, Katie quit her job, WTF. And my mom writes back the scary face, and then the face, and then the crying face. And I'm just watching this go back and forth. There's that, they didn't realize, of course, that I'm on because they don't understand group text. My mom does now. So I finally texted back and said, FYI, you're on a group text. And if you want to talk to me about my decision, just call me. LOL, like happy heart, whatever. And you saw, we all know this, like the bubbles come up and they go away. The bubbles came up and they went away and then nothing. And then finally, like 15 minutes later, I get a call. I'm like, hi, Mom. She's like, well, listen, we're so proud of you. We just know this is going to work, but you built this amazing career and you're happen to be going through a terrible divorce and blah. And I was like, Mom, it's okay. It's okay. I want you to share what you're feeling, but don't do it behind my back. Just tell me. Don't give me the bullshit. You can be like my friends would tell me, could be a terrible idea. You could lose all your money. Great, then share that with me. I don't want you to bullshit me, but let's have a real conversation about it.
Yeah, no, it's weird because just sitting here thinking about it, I realized it took my dad passing, and I think for two reasons, like it took him passing away for me to literally say, I am going to go do this full time. Now, was it he was no longer telling me, or there was never, not that like voice telling me that I couldn't do this or shouldn't do this, or was it just, life is short? Probably a combination of both, but yeah, it's interesting. So good job for you, Marin, on telling your daughter to take a swing.
Hi.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment and say thank you for sharing because it's really inspiring. I moved here from Africa like about 10 years ago, and I grew up with like 5 brothers. And so like what you're saying is just resonating with me. I was very competitive with them because growing up in Africa, they just, the gender equality is even a bigger issue over there. So like me being there and not being seen at all because I'm the youngest. I'm the 4th, and then I had 3 older brothers that they were looking up to. And I ended up being the only one that graduated college and went to get my master's. So I was very happy to be able to come here and finish my master's and just be career focused and oriented. But then I got married and got a family, and everything kind of got mixed. And this is the first time that I took an uncalculated risk, leaving my job with the pandemic to stay home with my kids because it was being too much for them going to school and just managing the whole thing. So you explaining this and talking about resilience is just motivating and showing me that even though this leaving the job was very uncalculated, I can get something out of it, because I'm trying to build my own company now, and then build a culture around women empowerment and resilience and the whole thing. So just thank you for sharing.
Well, I will say, I don't think you took an uncalculated risk. I think you took a calculated risk. You bet on yourself. That's a calculated risk. You know you can do something. And also, you have circumstances at home that you have to focus on. That's, if you don't, there's a bigger risk that something, there's a long-term effect. And I've talked to a lot of my friends that are moms and that have had to make similar decisions. And I think as long as you stay tethered to your community, to groups like Connect for Women or Luminary, and really stay connected, that risk will pay off 10 times over. And Nancy put in there, what is the company? Do you have a name yet of the company?
Yes, I just registered it. Sorry, I just registered it. And it's called the She Crew. And the idea behind it is just to create a community of mommies, and also being able to have like not freelancing, contracting jobs for moms, because maternity leave, some are unpaid, most are unpaid. And if you get paid, it's half or maybe a fourth of what you earn, which you can really leave off of, especially when you have new expenses coming in with the baby. So being able to do little works if you need to during that maternity leave time, where it's flexible enough for you to do it and then go back to your work if you want to, or if you need to take a longer time to bond with your baby, then you have that flexibility to have little gigs here and there. And also have a community, because this journey is just a lot for some people, and myself included. So just having a support group, and then a group maybe in your community to grow up with, and have friends for your kids to go to park with, and just have that starting.
The who,
so that's
the who, the what, and the how. You've got it. So we are gonna keep if you have a website yet, or just the name, put it in the chat so we can follow you.
Okay, thank you. I just have the name. I'm working on finding someone to help me build the website, because I have no technical skills whatsoever. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh.
Yes, that's fantastic. Well, thank you all. Anybody else have anything before we let Miss Cate go with her 103 fever? My gosh, thank you so much. Well, thank you all. Thanks.
Still get vaccinated, please.
Yes. The short-term pain is worth the long-term gain. And thank you again, Cate. Thank you all for joining us. Next Tuesday, we have another PowHERHour session, Close the Deal, a masterclass on moving your start line ahead of the pack for your next job or new business. So I think that's going to be an exciting one too. And just thank you, Cate. Feel better. And thanks everybody for joining.
Have a great rest of the day. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.